Hi and welcome to another video from the CTAD Clinic. My name is Dr. Mike Lloyd and I'm the Clinic Director. In this video we're going to be looking at flashbacks. So this is a part 1 and part 2 will be much more about managing flashbacks as they occur. What we're trying to do in flashbacks is work out why they happen. It's a natural response from the brain. For most part, it's an incredibly distressing and difficult experience for people to come to terms with because it is a reminder of past events. So the definition realistically of a flashback, if we think about what Mind have said, which is one of our foremost organisations for information about mental health in the UK, they say this: a flashback is a vivid experience in which you relive some aspects of a traumatic event or feel as if it's happening right now. This can sometimes be like watching a video of what happened, but flashbacks do not necessarily involve seeing images or reliving events from start to finish. What we take from this there is that a flashback is linked to trauma. So we have flashbacks because we have had a traumatic experience, and the flashback is some process taking place that brings that traumatic experience back into the present. So it is the past intruding on the present. That's how we understand what a flashback is. If we look at the DSM-5 criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, it gives us a bit more of an understanding. So in order to attain the diagnosis of PTSD, certain conditions have to take place. So these are within criteria B of the PTSD sort of diagnostic criteria. So it can be one of these three things. Either a recurrent, involuntary or intrusive distressing memory of the traumatic event, a recurrent distressing dream in which the content and or affect of the dream are related to the traumatic event, and or a dissociative reaction in which the individual feels or acts as if the traumatic events were recurring. All three of these things then are about some aspect of the past traumatic experience intruding on the present. So sometimes it can be triggered, so there can be a cue for it. So a person could be wandering through their life and everything is okay, and then they see a TV program or an advert, or they have a conversation with someone, or they receive some cue that triggers a flashback into happening. So that means that there isn't any particular reason internally why that flashback should happen, but they're sort of reminded from it from an outside cue. So let's say if a person has had a car crash and they have had some terrible traumatic event as a result of this accident, and then they see or they drive past on the road a road traffic accident that has taken place, it can remind them and suddenly get these intrusive memories from the past. So we'd see that as being like an external location for the flashback. It's happening because the outside world is intruding on the inside world. More often than not, though, people's flashbacks occur from an internal source. So they are, let's say, at home, or they are in fairly calm surroundings, and they get assaulted by these flashbacks, and people describe it as being like an assault. So in our clinical practice, very many people say, I feel like I'm being abused all over again, or I'm being assaulted, or I'm being attacked. These flashbacks are awful, they're terrible, they're taking place, and they are ruining my life. They're taking my peace away, and I cannot escape my trauma because the flashback keeps coming back, keeps reminding me of the trauma. I'm not able to let go. And people get very, very distressed, they become very fearful, they become very avoidant. And again, these are all aspects of that post-traumatic stress symptom criteria, sort of avoidance, flashbacks type things. People just want to push them away, have nothing to do with them. Actually, what we see in clinical practice is that's often the least helpful thing to do. It can solve a problem in the moment, i.e. get this horrible flashback of this traumatic event, push it as far away as possible, get on with life, act as if nothing's happening. Brilliant. Except what we also know about flashbacks is they're a bit like boomerangs, they will keep coming back. Now we know that the brain is a logical thing. It doesn't do things for no reason whatsoever. So we ask ourselves, why would the brain be continually reminding a person of a traumatic experience that has happened many, many years ago? Or it could be like last week, but generally we're talking flashbacks of things that happened from a long time ago. So there has to be a reason why this is happening. And the best reason that we understand in our clinical practice is that these flashbacks are communications from the brain that something has not yet happened. You may hear about the word process when we're talking about trauma, that traumatic experiences need to be processed. We think this is part of what's going on. There is something unprocessed within that traumatic experience. It could be either a memory or a feeling or a judgment or some aspect of self, some aspect of that experience of the trauma that is laying dormant, unprocessed. And the brain gets to a certain point and goes, we need to deal with this. It has to happen. The problem being the brain and the person often don't go hand in hand. So the brain wants to do something, the person's going, no, absolutely don't want to do that. So the brain passes the communication via the flashback. The person blocks, avoids, takes it away, and therefore we end up in this dance where the brain is continually offering something, the person is pushing it away. If you see a flashback as like a communication, for example, getting a credit card bill, invoice or statement, it's rarely something that people want to get. And what happens sometimes is people get this and they feel, well, I can't pay this, I'm going to ignore it. And they put it in a drawer and they avoid it. But the bill will come back. And then it comes back again, and then it comes back again, and then additional fees, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And the worse it gets, the more a person wants to block it out because it becomes more and more scary. So what can happen is the intensity of a flashback increases as a person starts avoiding that flashback and blocking it and putting it away. The brain's like, right, well, if you're going to push it away, I need to throw it back at you with increased intensity. So maybe, or increased frequency. It happens more and more often, and or it's becoming more and more intense. And that avoidant response then kicks in, the person pushes it away. What we try and do in clinical practice within the therapeutic setting, and this is absolutely something that people do need support to do because it can be incredibly distressing, is to stop avoiding the flashback. So the surprising thing about flashbacks is that you need to want to have them. And that's the bit that often gets people and kind of makes them go, no, what are you talking about? This can't be right. And we feel it is, because when we work with this with people and we organize ourselves and we put this intervention together in therapeutic practice, that a person starts wanting to have these flashbacks because they want to deal with the trauma. And that is the thing. The brain is trying to get us to deal with the trauma because it hasn't been dealt with. And flashbacks are an incredibly useful communication tool of the brain to get us to do that, except they're awful, they're horrible, they're distressing, and people do not want to have them. So we have this conflict between what we might want to do and what the brain is wanting us to do. The goal then is to find some harmony, is to put these two things together so that the flashbacks are offered in a way that is actually useful for the person to be able to manage them. So it doesn't trigger a dissociative reaction, for example, or it doesn't trigger some sort of very maladaptive or unhealthy coping strategy. The person is able to take the flashback on, work with it, in therapy, begin to process that flashback, make sense of it. That is the bit that allows the trauma to actually heal itself from within. There we have it then. What often people think is that flashbacks are these terrible, terrible events that happen. They ruin people's lives. They ruin my life. It's awful. I want to get rid of it. I don't see why it's happening. My life is good and this is taking place and it's spoiling everything and I can't get rid of it and it's awful. The surprising thing is that we need to change our perspective on this. We need to say, that's my brain trying to help me. It doesn't do it in a way which might be particularly helpful in the moment. The big picture is that it is trying to help, and we need to listen to the brain. Always comes back to this, especially within the concept of dissociation. It's always about trying to listen to the brain. It knows what it's doing, but it doesn't always do it in a way that we understand. So if we start thinking about flashbacks as being useful tools to heal trauma, rather than these awful, distressing things that are just ruining our lives, our perspective shifts, and we're able to start walking towards the flashbacks rather than running away from them. I'm going to do a part 2 on some of the tools and methods with which we can actually start to hold and approach flashbacks and deal with them in a really useful way. So that's going to be another video that I'll do, so please look forward to that. Leave any comments as per usual in the section below the video. Like and subscribe, share, please do all those useful things. It's really great that people are working with these videos, and we'll keep making them. So between now and the next video, please do take great care.